Florida State got screwed. That's the easiest way to put it, but I'm going to explain why. Welcome to the Voice of College Football, breaking down the game we all love each and every day with you, and this, the most consequential of days in college football, where the playoff committee takes in the season. They're supposed to re-establish and reconstruct the season each and every week, so they take in those championship games from each conference, and then they size it all up and deliver what are supposed to be, is it the four best or the four most deserving teams? Okay, this is how I see it. Let's start out with this. I do not believe that Florida State is one of the four best teams in the country. With Jordan Travis, I believe that they've got a great argument for that. I don't think that they're quite there, but here's the point. It shouldn't matter, and does not matter, what I think. We need to do the right thing. We need to reward teams and recognize what has been earned. And what was earned by Florida State is a trip to the college football playoff based on being a Power 5 conference champion with an undefeated record. In the history of the playoffs, this now the 10th season, this has never happened where a Power 5 champion with an undefeated record has been left out. 12 other teams made it. Florida State did not. So the obvious issue, the obvious topic here is the Jordan Travis injury. And I totally understand the point that if you're going to select the four best teams in college football, maybe you look at the situation and say Florida State is no longer that. They are a different team, as has been explained by the committee, without Jordan Travis, throwing for 55 yards in the ACC championship game against Louisville with a third-string quarterback. And then with the second-string quarterback, Tate Rodemaker, pretty dismal pedestrian showing against a Florida team that finished 5-7 and had a marginal defense. I get all of that. However, if that is the evaluation, we are forgetting undefeated records. We are forgetting conference championships. We're going to go with the four best teams regardless. Why wasn't this done before? The criteria that is given to the committee has not changed since day one of 2014. Select the four best teams, you say? Then why was TCU selected in 2022? We all knew TCU was not one of the four best teams. And then we saw it play out on the field. Alabama, Tennessee could have been in that spot. They were not one of the four best teams, TCU, last year. The committee could have said, you know what? TCU lost a game, and this team lost a game. TCU lost a game to a team that was outside the top 10 in the country, Kansas State. So you had a non-conference champion that was clearly not one of the four best teams that had lost a game. Leave out TCU in 2022. Leave out Cincinnati in 2021. You had a team that was playing the roughly 95th schedule in the country in Cincinnati that plays a completely different level of football. They are not one of the four best teams. There were other selections to be made. I know it would have been a bit of a stretch because we have this thing about, well, 2 losses, you can't make the playoff, even though Auburn would have as a 2-loss team in 2017. So the committee can't even go to that 2-loss crap because they would have selected a 2-loss team in Auburn had they won the SEC championship game because they were in the top 4 as a 2-loss team. They were comfortably in the top 4 at either number 2 or number 3 in 2017. So the 2-loss business doesn't fly because they would have done it before. So you could have put Bama or Tennessee in 2022 over TCU. You could have put in Ohio State, Baylor, or Notre Dame, even though they lost the head-to-head in 2021 against Cincinnati. Well, they play a legitimate schedule, and we're not just evaluating one game. We're evaluating the entire 12 or 13 game season, and Cincinnati clearly played an underwhelming, awful schedule as compared to the other teams that have had to make the playoff. Look at 2019. I clearly remember 2019, you had Clemson, Ohio State, LSU, all undefeated champions. And then you had this 4th spot. And the committee selected Oklahoma because they earned it. They were the only 1-loss conference champion left. So they were clearly the team that should have been selected. And I agreed. But people asked me, Mark, did the committee get it right? Did they select the 4 best teams? And I said, well, wait a minute. They got it right, and they selected the team that earned it with a conference championship with only one loss. But they didn't select the four best teams, and anybody with a football brain knows they didn't select the four best teams. Oklahoma's going to get murdered by LSU. Meanwhile, Alabama's out here at 10-2. They lost on a missed field goal against Auburn, 48-45, and they lost to LSU, who was the best team in the country and the best team in who knows how long. They lost that game 46-41 in a classic game. Was Alabama going to go to the playoff and give up 7 touchdowns in the first half to LSU? No, they were one of the 4 best teams. So if you're going to use that criteria, then use it each and every season. 2015, Michigan State was not one of the 4 best teams. Ohio State should have been selected. Well, you say, Mark, head-to-head in Big Ten Championship. No, 4 best teams, right? Michigan State had to be given one of the biggest boneheaded blender plays of all time to defeat Michigan, and they lost to a 5-7 Nebraska team, and they beat a decent Iowa team on a goal line play by that much, maybe by that much, on a disputed call. So Michigan State was not one of the top 4 teams in 2015. We could keep doing this. Are you selecting the 4 best, or are you selecting the teams that earned it? And Florida State earned it. They would have had Tate Rodemaker back for the playoff game. Let's also consider this. We're discouraging teams from scheduling tough non-conference games. Michigan, for the last 2 years, has not scheduled anybody outside the conference. And no problem, they're in the playoff. And they earned it in the Big Ten. But still, no big non-conference games. The individual schools should not be scheduling their own games. I've gone through that. I've got a whole system. Watch the videos that I provided. I'll put them down. If I can find them, I'll put them down in the comments section. I've laid out a scheduling formula that would work for college football that takes the process out of the hands of the schools, and the schedules should be handed to each team. Okay, but understand this. Florida State said, okay, we're supposed to play tough non-conference games to prove ourselves outside of the ACC. They scheduled LSU, and what is so ironic is that Alabama, of course, also played LSU. Florida State beat LSU worse, more decisively, and they played them at a neutral site as opposed to Alabama playing and beating LSU at home. Florida State should go hardline on this. They should throw up a banner at Doak Campbell Stadium and say, we are the national champions of 2023. What else could we do? When this went down with UCF in 2017 and 18, I was the first person I know of, because I said it immediately. I said, if I'm UCF, we got screwed. And understand this is a completely different argument in many aspects, because UCF was not one of the 4 best teams. They, like Cincinnati in 2021, didn't play the kind of schedule that needs to be in the playoffs. But my point at that time was, make a decision, College Football Playoff Committee. Are you including group of 5 teams or not including them? And if we're not including group of 5 teams, then we need to send them off to play their own playoff. We need to either formally include them or not just placate them and make them feel good by saying, we're going to include you in our rankings. So the same holds true right now for Florida State. Hang the banner. Don't go to a bowl game. Refuse to go to a bowl game. Say, we're not playing in a bowl game. It's a farce. We're not going. We're not playing. I know that they've been set up with a game with Georgia, I believe in the Cotton Bowl, Fiesta Bowl, whatever it is. I would say we're not going. We're not going to be there. I don't know if they're contractually obligated at this point by the conference or by the whole playoff system to go. But if not, I'd say, see ya, we're not going. We're going to hang our banner and say 2023 national champions. Jesse Palmer made the comment, and I think Jesse Palmer's an excellent analyst during these games and in the studio as well. Jesse Palmer, I have long since respected his work. He knows what he's talking about clearly. However, he was making the point late in the Florida State game that they should tack on another touchdown because people are watching and it's going to make them look more impressive. Well, if a touchdown to make it 23-6 instead of 16-6 would fool the College Football Playoff Committee into thinking Florida State was more impressive, if they're that stupid, they're not doing their jobs. If that would influence them to see a touchdown score with 45 seconds left that's meaningless in a game that's over, if that was going to impress and influence and impact the committee, then they are clearly not doing their jobs. They're clearly incompetent, and they need to be removed if that was going to influence them. So either Jesse Palmer, in that instance, doesn't know what he's talking about, or the committee is grossly negligent and incompetent for allowing that to possibly impact them. I truly believe that if this was not an Alabama-Florida State comparison, if this was Georgia, let's say this was Georgia, even though the committee in their final rankings have Florida State at 5 and Georgia at 6, if they were comparing Georgia with the same exact resume and Florida State with the same exact resume and the Jordan Travis injury, that even though in the final rankings, I think just to make Florida State look better, feel better, to show that they made the consideration to put them in 4, that they would have done the same thing with Georgia. I truly believe that if there was the same exact comparison between Georgia and Florida State for the 4 spot, they would have selected Georgia, and they would have used the same logic and the same point about the Jordan Travis injury and the team looking different against Louisville and against Florida. The committee, I am calling upon the committee. This is what they need to do. They need to all travel to Tallahassee. They need to meet with the Florida State football team. And they need to explain their decision. And they also need to say, regardless of you going through winter workouts, working your tails off every day, running, lifting weights, going to film sessions, going to meetings, traveling, really not being college students because of that, spring training, August camp in 100-degree heat and humidity, all of that, being basically a professional football player here, despite all of that, despite all the effort, and doing everything that was asked of you, which is 13-0 in a conference championship and a win over LSU that was better than the win that Alabama posted against that same LSU team, you were being left out of the playoffs. They should have to face Florida State and make their decision clear to them and why it was made in such a way. From the time that this was announced, I'm not talking about this decision, I'm talking about 10 years ago, a 14 playoff, I immediately said 2 things when asked. Is this a good thing for college football? Did they get it right? I said, no, they didn't get it right. We've got 5 conferences. We've got 4 slots. But it's better in that it affords more teams that are worthy an opportunity to win the national championship. So it's better than the BCS system in that it affords an additional 2 teams to compete for a national championship. However, it's not a good system. Also, I should have stuck to this because I've defaulted to calling it a playoff, but I said from the very start, it's documented, it's on video, I called it an invitational because it's not a playoff. A playoff is a set of objective criteria that determine, without selection, that determine who is going to the playoff. There is no argument, no debate, no discussions that need to be made, no meetings that have to occur, no announcements that tell us who made the NBA playoffs, the NFL playoffs, the Major League Baseball playoffs. This is an invitational. And no, it's not like the NCAA men's basketball invitational, because that is different. In that most of the field, roughly half the field, is automatic bids for winning conferences, and that committee is basically, any moron could select 60 of the 68 teams. I don't even watch a basketball game, and you could just give me the standings, the metrics, the strength of schedule, and I could select roughly 60 of the 68 teams. They're basically selecting the bottom of the selections, the ones that are not going to compete for a national championship, plus their power is basically in the seeding process. In this one, all the powers in this committee to determine the 4 teams that are going to compete for a national championship. And they blew it here. They haven't done it in the past. Why did they do it here? Selecting not the 4 best teams or what they thought were the 4 best teams, but they went with that selection this time, but not in the past. It changes. And this is what it comes down to. Last point. Get this. There is a criteria of items that are objective. There is objective criteria to this. The problem is that the committee doesn't use all the objective criteria in the same order with the same priorities and apply it to every team in every situation. They don't do that. They select whatever out of that bag of criteria, whatever fits their narrative and whatever they want to have be accomplished. That's what they select. So, head-to-head's going to serve our purpose. We can use head-to-head. Conference championship. Okay, we can use it here, but let's ignore it there and not mention it. They use whatever they need to back up their selection. That's what it all comes down to. And let's also understand that it serves ESPN, Disney, and the SEC and the SEC network to have an SEC team there. Not just for better ratings, supposedly, for that national championship and that playoff with Alabama there and Florida State not there, but also the SEC network. And I understand that ESPN and Disney have an ACC network, but they have not poured in anywhere close to the same resources, production value, talent, any of that, nor do they have the subscriber base that's anywhere close for the ACC network than they do for the SEC network. This is a client of ESPN and Disney. And just imagine that if the SEC would have been shut out of this playoff for the next 6 weeks through the national championship, yes, there might have been a peak of viewership to watch Paul Feinbaum and a bunch of irate SEC fans call in and go nuts. That might have peaked for a few days, but the SEC, while the rest of college football was playing a college football playoff, would have been shut out, and for 6 weeks the SEC network ratings would have plummeted. They would have nosedived because they would have had no relevant recent news to talk about, because nobody cares anymore about the bowl games. Nobody's going to watch the bowl. People watch the bowl games. It's the holidays. People watch football. They watch the bowl games. But in terms of giving them the importance that they once had, that does not exist in the playoff era. So the SEC would have been largely ignored. Therefore, the SEC network would have been largely ignored, almost completely ignored over the next 6 weeks, with 4 playoff teams coming from other conferences. So understand, that's a business decision. It's a business move, and it's a good one for Disney and ESPN. That's what I got to say. Leave your comments down below in the comment section right here at the Voice of College Football.